would like us to start in the next 1 minute. I understand that we have quite a number of attendees waiting. So I'll just give it 1 more minute before we begin with our webinar, if that's okay. Feel free to give me a thumbs up if that's okay with everyone. Okay, sweet. Thank you. Excellent. Welcome to this Pacific Oceans Alliance webinar that has been organized on behalf of SPREP and the Office of the Pacific Oceans Commissioner. My name is Moira Olongovaka. I am the Ocean Engagement Officer here at the Office of the Pacific Oceans Commissioner. And today we are pleased to partner with SPREP for this webinar to keep you, the ocean community of the Blue Pacific region, informed about the Plastics Treaty negotiations process. Before we dive into the substance, I kindly ask that all the panelists, please on your videos, so we can quickly take a photo. Thank you. And I'd like to see all your big, warm Pacific smiles. Okay. Thank you very much. Faftailasi. At this point in time, I would kindly invite Dr. Philemon Manoni, the Pacific Oceans Commissioner, to deliver a few welcoming remarks for us. Dr. Manoni.
Thank you. Thank you, Marilyn. And excellent, great once again to see a lot of friends of the ocean on Zoom, and look forward to a wonderful discussion today. But let me first of all take this opportunity to welcome all of you, senior officials from governments, colleagues, experts, to this important session on the negotiations to achieve a comprehensive, cross-cutting, and effective treaty to rid our oceans once again from the devastation of plastic pollution. According to some global reports, nearly a quarter of the world's plastic waste is mismanaged. This leaks into the environment, into the rivers and oceans, coastlines, and transporting about more than 1 million tons into the oceans. So the urgency to act globally to arrest this situation is clearly undeniable. And we continue to hope that we will ultimately land on a comprehensive legal framework that is, as I said, once again, cross-cutting and comprehensive, addressing the full scope of challenges facing the global community, but especially for small island developing states and LDCs. So the March 2022 UNEA resolution is no doubt a historic one. And since the first INC meeting in Uruguay, there has been a substantial support for a legally binding treaty on plastics. So we continue to support that effort, increasing support from the Pacific through the work of our lead agency. But there is indeed much to be done. But for today, let me thank you, all of you again, for taking time out to join this important session. As the saying goes, one small drop in the ocean often creates a ripple effect. And in this regard, I'd like to thank SPREP, acknowledge SPREP for leadership in leading the discussions and support to Pacific Island members at the Plastics Treaty. OPOC is also happy to support through our contribution through the participation of Ms. Teko in this process. But this indeed session also serves as an opportunity to showcase the wealth of knowledge and expertise of the members of the Pacific Oceans Alliance on issues of utmost importance to the Pacific. I hope there will be more POA activities, and we look forward to organizing a lot more activities and utilizing the wealth and knowledge of the Pacific Ocean Alliance. And I look forward to eager participation from all of you in future sessions. And I also wanted to acknowledge the work of our missions in New York, and in this regard, look forward to the updates and their presentations today. So with these few remarks, understanding the ocean functions can empower us as peoples of the Pacific, make informed decisions, take responsible actions that foster and promote life and skills and our civic pride as citizens of the Pacific. I wish all of you the very best in this webinar, and as we continue our discussions, and especially taking full advantage of the wealth of experience and knowledge that our experts around the table today will share with us as we embark on this journey towards a plastics treaty. So with those few remarks, once again, thank you, SPREP, for the collaboration. Thank you for your leadership in the charts and support to members at these negotiations. And we hope that we will have a very good discussion today to learn a little bit more about the process, the challenges, and where we intend to end up at the end of these negotiations. Thanks you once again, Sulang, and see you all soon. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. As the Commissioner indicated, we wanted to provide you with information on the status of the negotiations. We have invited a few of our regional delegates to shed more light on the process. As we would like this session to be as informative as possible, we would kindly invite you to drop any questions you have on the chat or Q&A for that matter. We will attempt to cover them at the end of the interventions, while at the same time, if we are not able to, we will provide responses later, obviously through our technical arm, SPREP, and of course our expertise online, especially our speakers from New York and across the region. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'm delighted to invite Anthony Taloli to the floor to provide an overview of the plastic negotiations process. Tony, as we may know him, is a director at SPREP and leads the team on waste management and pollution control, and is the one we all look up to as lead for regional organizations support to Pacific countries in this process. Tony, would you please enlighten us about this process and how this process came about? Why should we as the Blue Pacific inhabitants care? And tell us about what the Pacific is organizing in this process. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much. And Abik Talofa, Bula, and also Ali from Samoa. I think this is a very useful and timely webinar for our Pacific Ocean Alliance. I have a short presentation which I've shared, and if you allow me, I'll just continue with the presentation, which will respond to those very important questions that you put to me in the introduction. So initially, to the Pacific Ocean Commissioner, His Excellency Dr. Philemon Manoni, Ali, and Talofa from Samoa. To the Pacific Seas Chair, Ms. Marjorie Wells, to the AOSIS Chair, Anu Maslofa, to all the Excellencies, the Pacific Ocean Alliance members, the distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. A big bula and a greetings from SPREP on behalf of the Director General, Mr. Safanai Nawandra. Thank you very much, Meta Facilitator, and also to OPOC for organizing this webinar. And it is a pleasure to speak to you to provide a little bit more information to the Pacific Ocean Alliance on the INC, on the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee to negotiate for a global plastic treaty. The issue of plastic pollution was made, I guess, was a landmark decision made at UNEA 5.2. So the UNEA 5.2 resolution 514 to establish an intergovernmental negotiating committee to negotiate for a new international agreement to address plastic pollution, including from the marine environment, was heralded by the secretary or by the executive director for UNEP as the most significant achievement since the Paris Agreement. As such, so as a result of the UNEA 514 resolution, UNEP was mandated to hold 5 INCs to conclude by 2024, that's at the end of this year, and to hold a diplomatic conference next year in 2025. As you can see from this slide, that so far we have had 4 INCs, with INC 1 in Uruguay in 2022, INC 2 in Paris in May 2023 last year, as well as INC 3 in Nairobi at the end of last year. And early this year in April, we had INC 4 in Ottawa in Canada. At each of the INCs, the Pacific SIDS, led by the PCIDS chair, has coordinated the Pacific preparatory meetings before as well as during the INC process. The upcoming last and final INC will be held in Busan in November this year. The engagement of the Pacific SIDS in the INC process has been made possible with funding support from the Government of Australia through the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Also, we had assistance from New Zealand and the United Nations, as well as many other partners and donors that have provided assistance bilaterally to the member states. As you can see from the slide, that there is a intersessional session that will take place in August, and you'll hear more about this from some of the speakers later on. With this support has enabled the Secretariat through the Pacific SIDS chair to plan well ahead to implement the INC strategy that compromises of the negotiations training, the preparatory workshops, and the amplification of Pacific voices through news articles and social media, through partnerships, through technical briefs, as well as working with OPOC and the One Crop approach, similar to the One Crop approach that you have experienced in climate change negotiations. We very much value the input from the Pacific Ocean Alliance to the Pacific SIDS strategy through OPOC. And this important partnership is key. And this slide just depicts or has some of the key partners that we have had the fortune to provide, rather to get their assistance, to provide that technical support to Pacific SIDS. Now, why is it important? Why is taking part and fully engaging in a intergovernmental negotiating committee to address plastic pollution important to us? Well, as you know, the issue of plastic pollution is clearly articulated in one of the pillars, in Oceans and Environment pillar, in the Blue Pacific Continent 2050 strategy, which we're very glad to have it as our North Star. But also, we know and we've heard some of the stats that the Ocean Commission has mentioned in his opening address, that we know from the UNEP report on global assessment of marine plastic pollution in 2021, that the amount of mismanaged plastic waste that could enter into the marine environment is 1/4 of the plastic that is produced, or is about 9 to 14 million tons per year. This is the amount of mismanaged plastic waste that could enter into the marine environment. But we also know that the Pacific, through some of the studies through the GEMPAC report, contributes less than 1.3% of the global plastic pollution, but are exposed to 3 plastic gyros. Two which is clearly affecting us. That is the North Pacific gyro, that is the north of Hawaii, as well as the South Plastic gyro in the east, next to French Polynesia, Rapa Nui, and also Latin America. Why else do we care? We know that the remediation of marine litter in the Pacific in beach cleanups, from the work carried out through the international coastal cleanups or the international coastal day cleanups, that has been carried out through some of the work in the countries supported by some of our projects here, including the French project here, as well as the Pacific Ocean Leader project. They have carried out numerous amounts of beach surveys, 65 in total, and they have carried this out from 2019 to 2024 across 6 Pacific Island countries, mainly Fiji, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Vanuatu, and Wallis and Futuna. The surveys have removed about 72,000 items with a total weight of about 4,500 kgs. It has involved large amounts of community members, approximately about almost around 1,700 Pacific citizens that were involved in these coastal cleanups. From the data, we know that there are 3 most common categories that were picked up as part of the marine litter. 58% of these were plastic, 15% of these were metal, and 12% of these were ceramic. And there were lots of different categories. Apart from the cleanups that has been participated in the international coastal day cleanups in the same countries, a total of 59 cleanups involving 3,500 volunteers, and these volunteers collected about 20 tons of waste from the beaches and from the surrounding environments. This is a lot of plastic, and much of it can be attributed to not just from the terrestrial sources, but also from marine sources. And I'd like to just add too that from the marine sources, we know that from our fisheries observers, so from the SPC and FFA tuna fisheries observers, that these observers have been collecting MARPOL violations from fishing vessels, mainly from Pesena vessels because they're 100% coverage, but also from longliners and from other vessels. And throughout the years from 2003 up until last year, which we have done a series of assessments of the Gen 6 reports, that they have collected over 20,000 MARPOL violations. Many of these are also plastics as well. So you can see that the issue for us is real, that we're not only collecting litter from beaches from our terrestrial sources, but also from the marine sources, but also that many of these data or many of these plastic are not just from our islands, but also come from the transboundary movement outside the Pacific. So all this is very important to us. So, Madam Co-Facilitator, this is just a brief snapshot of why the issue is of importance to us, and a bit of a snapshot of the INC process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tony, for that very informative presentation, and also for sharing with us those alarming statistics. It's important for us to note that the issue of plastic pollution is very real. So we look forward to SPREP and its continuous contributions to this process. As Tony indicated, the Pacific is very active in this process, and Pacific Island countries have been strongly involved through the Pacific Small Island Development States, or PSIDS group, I should say. To tell us a little bit more about the PSIDS and what the main priorities of this group are, we are delighted to invite Marjorie Wells, Chair of the PSIDS Working Group at the United Nations headquarters. She is also First Secretary at the Vanuatu Permanent Mission to the UN in New York. Ms. Wells hails from the beautiful and mighty island of Vanuatu. You will think it is totally normal that she sounds so well versed in the plastics process. It is not. Apparently, she received the mandate to lead the discussions for the chair in mid-February, which of course, as we know, was on the heels of the fourth session of the INC. And I hear she has done a splendid job. Also remarkable is the fact that the PrEP committee for the first conference of the parties of the BBNJ agreement, which has not entered into force yet, is currently underway. But she found time to speak to us, and we are very, very grateful. Marjorie, welcome. We are delighted to have you today.
Greetings. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Facilitator. Thank you also to the organizers, PrEP and OPOC, for organizing this webinar. It is an opportunity for us to connect to the ocean community. So thank you also to you all for attending today. It is my pleasure to speak on behalf of the PSIDS group to give a brief overview of about our priorities in the process. First, I would like to acknowledge the two previous chairs, Samoa and Palau, who led the group since INC 1. As you may know, Vanuatu assumed the chairmanship in January of this year. So right as we were heading towards INC 4, like you said, Madam Facilitator. So say this has been a steep learning curve for Vanuatu and myself would be an understatement. Let us dive into the subject. We'll go to slide 3. All right, so the PSIDS are a political grouping at the UN, which includes the 14 Pacific Island countries, with representation at the UN plus Cook Islands and Niue. The way we engage in this process is similar to other multilateral processes. First, we coordinate within the PSIDS group to understand our collective interests and formulate our positions. We are supported in this by SPREP, Tony and his team, as the lead coordinating agency in the Pacific, as well as the OPOC, and indirectly by the POA through submissions that you've made through OPOC. Recently, we were happy to receive inputs, especially on fisheries elements from SPC, FAME and FFA, but we certainly encourage the crop family to work with SPREP and OPOC to strengthen our positions and interest in this treaty. As a group of small island countries, we are members of the Alliance of Small Island States, AOSIS, which represents 39 countries. So this is a substantial negotiating group. We have we also have meetings with other countries, including members of the PIF families, in particular Australia and New Zealand. We have actually many similar views and have engaged together during intersessional work. PCIDS are also a member of the Asia Pacific grouping. This is a regional grouping. It has many divergent views on everything, to say the least. Lastly, some of our members are members of HAC, which Rose will speak more about. Move on to slide 4. In terms of the substance and what we are pushing for in this treaty, since INC 1, we have been advocating for an ambitious treaty that addresses the comprehensive lifestyle of plastics. What does this mean concretely? As explained previously by Tony, the impacts of plastic pollution on PCIDS put additional strains to our economies and the limited capacity of PCIDS. Even if we were to receive billions of dollars of support for waste management and remediation, we would not be able to resolve this issue. Like climate change or global biodiversity loss, the solution is into effective global cooperation through international legally binding measures to ensure appropriate and relevant actions are taken and sufficient resources are allocated. In particular, PCIDS have advocated that meeting the mandate of UNEA 514 require the following. 1, reductions in primary plastic polymers and overproduction of plastic products. 2, prevention of harmful chemicals from being used in any plastics that are produced. 3, harmonized marking and labeling. 4, criteria for sustainable design and traceability of chemicals. 5, the use of relevant traditional knowledge and practices of indigenous people and of local communities, with full respect for their rights as a complement to the best available science in understanding and tackling plastic pollution. The 6th point is cross-cutting requirements for transparency, information exchange and cooperation, and finally, comprehensive finance package with a robust financing mechanism for the effective implementation of the binding measures, coupled with technology transfer, technical assistance, and capacity building. Also, in implementing the future agreement, PCIDS have promoted the recognition of special circumstances as small island developing states, but Anama will speak more on this. On to slide 5. One element that is of particular importance for our region is fisheries. When talking about plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, we cannot speak about the fisheries sector. So currently the discussions in the INCs, whether to have specific provisions in the treaty text where would these provisions fall, either management alone, either waste management alone, so only focusing on fishing waste, or higher up on the life cycle of plastic, looking at fishing product design, for instance, or establishing a dedicated program of work, or a mix of these. As a result, it is its own thing and a stand-up issue. So not covered in a specific place in the current zero draft, and captures those different options. It is my understanding that more discussions with the fisheries community and the relevant crop will be organized soon. The idea for us is to ensure that we have robust measures in place to make the fisheries sector less impacting, but at the same time, that our fishing sector is not disproportionately impacted by such measures. However, we have not discussed the impact of plastic pollution on the value of our fishing products. Slide 6. To sum up, the PCIDS want an ambitious treaty with legally binding measures, the full life cycle of plastic from production to waste, and legacy plastic. While the PCIDS might be on the receiving end of plastic pollution, we also actors and are ready to do our share, but to enable us to contribute to tackling the problem, we need appropriate support that take into account our special circumstances, and that it does not impose disproportionate burden on us. I thank you.
Thank you to Marjorie, and thank you so much for taking us through the role of the PCIDS. We understand that it is a substantial group within the Pacific, and also for shedding light on the PCIDS and its memberships, including that of the IOSIS and the Asia Pacific group. Thank you for also highlighting the impacts of plastic, certainly, and how this creates a lot of challenges for small island development states, especially in the Pacific, and also for highlighting the issues surrounding fisheries. On that very note, the PCIDS works a lot with the IOSIS to amplify the interests of the Pacific, because 39 countries, as Marjorie had mentioned, have a collective and stronger voice or impact together. To tell us more about the priorities and challenges faced by CIDS in this process, we are delighted to invite Anama Solofa. Anama is the lead ocean negotiator for IOSIS. As such, and like Marjorie, she is in the middle of the BBNJ discussions. Anama is no stranger to the the regional level, I should say, actually. She worked both in SPREP and in FFA. And as you will hear from her soon, she is also very well versed and familiar with the regional context. Anama, Faftai for taking the time to enlighten us. Apologies, Anama. Can you, sorry, can you begin again? I think we didn't hear you there for 1 second. Thank you. No, can we try that again, Anama? Maybe try that once more.
Okay. How about now?
Lovely. We can hear you. Splendid. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so now that you can hear me and hopefully see me, let me try and see if I can make this presentation work. Fingers crossed. As long as, can you give me a thumbs up if you're seeing it and it's not in presentation, presenter mode, please? Thank you. Thank you, Moira and Talofalava, everyone. It's great to be here today. Thank you for giving AOSIS an opportunity to present to the Pacific Ocean Alliance on the priorities of small island developing states in the plastic pollution treaty negotiations. As introduced, my name is Ana Masolofa. I am quite happy to see a lot of familiar faces in terms of the presenters that we have today, but also friends, colleagues, and former colleagues in the list of participants. And it's great to see the interest that there is in this negotiation. So as introduced, I am the lead negotiator on ocean issues for the Alliance of Small Island States, which is 39 small island developing states from the regions of the Pacific, the Caribbean, and the ACE region, which is the Indian Ocean, South China Sea, and there are a range of countries in different stages of development. So it makes for interesting negotiations at all times, as those who have been involved in the process are familiar with. Now, AOSIS has engaged and negotiated as a group in the INC process since INC 1 in Uruguay, which Tony spoke about at the end of 2022. Throughout the process, AOSIS has reiterated countless times 5 main or key priority areas that the objective of the instrument is to end plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, as is set out in the Resolution 514, UNEP Resolution, or UNEA Resolution 514, my apologies. AOSIS has also spoken to the scope of the instrument being prescribed by the resolution, including the necessary actions across the full life cycle of plastics to achieve the ultimate objective of ending plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, which is where the negotiation of this actually began. The agreement must also be inclusive, ambitious, effective, equitable, with mechanisms to allow for higher ambition over time. We have also spoken to the need for new, additional, adequate, predictable, sustainable, and timely financial resources made available to developing country parties, particularly small island developing states, where the level of funding available is aligned with the scope of the substantive obligations under the instrument. The provision of finance is also to prioritize, or should prioritize, SIDS, both for simplified and harmonized access, as well as allocation. Specific provisions to support SIDS, including through priority access to means of implementation, especially given the disproportionate impacts of plastic pollution on SIDS, should be also part of the instrument. Now, with that in mind, I'll speak to a few key issues for SIDS, namely need for exemption mechanisms, product design standards, waste management, ghost gear or ALDFG, and remediation of plastic pollution, legacy plastic pollution, and also to one of the subsidiary bodies that AOSIS has put forward, which is the Scientific, Technical, and Economic Panels, or STEPS. So in terms of the exemptions mechanisms, we speak to these because SIDS, or small island developing states, are net importers of plastics. We contribute minimally to global plastic production. So the impacts on us are greater if production continues without caution. AOSIS has emphasized that any measures taken to regulate chemicals, polymers, and plastic products under the instrument that there should be based on specific criteria, and this to be set by the Conference of the Parties or the COPs. We do emphasize, though, that exemptions shouldn't apply where targeted substances or plastic products are harmful to human health or the environment at any stage of the plastic life cycle. These also, if deemed that based on strong scientific evidence and the knowledge and inputs of indigenous peoples and local communities are also considered. I also emphasize that there must be flexible access to exemptions for parties that are developing countries in the future instrument, including SIDS. Those are heavily reliant on imports based on evidence of potential adverse effects, whether socioeconomic or sociocultural, if these exemptions are not applied. Next, and speak to plastic product design. Currently, as we know, plastic products, particularly packaging, are designed to be single-use, disposable, things that are convenient, but also accelerate pollution and waste management issues. There are many instances, as we've seen, where they are, the way they're designed is not compatible with reuse or refill schemes. Ooh, sorry, English. It's the end of the day. So the chemical composition of plastic products is something that we feel must almost isn't always known and can be problematic in the sense of how recycling technologies and methodologies can deal with them. And with that, thinking along those lines, the plastic product design standards that we suggest could be established by the COP include to prevent plastic products from becoming plastic pollution, prioritizing repairability, reuse, recycling, promoting global harmonization of standards, and requiring labeling to disclose and the full composition of plastic products to support circularity and responsible consumer behavior. Next is one that the region has worked a lot on through the work of the SPREPS division, which is waste management, but is also key to the other sub-regions of the Alliance of Small Island States. So SIDS, as we know, being islands, we lack resources, technology, and capabilities, particularly land space and infrastructure, to effectively manage plastic waste, including transboundary plastic waste. For AOSIS, the instrument must support increased collection, sorting, recycling, and sound disposal of plastic waste. with targets based on national circumstances. As I mentioned at the beginning, for AOSIS, our member countries are at various stages of development, and that also means that the stages of the national circumstances can differ from one member to the next. In terms of waste management, the design of facilities to ensure safe and environmentally sound management of waste should also be developed. Dangerous waste management practices are to be regulated in line with just transition, scientific evidence, the Basel technical guidelines on environmental sound management of plastic waste. And then building on the requirements under the Basel Convention, plastic waste trade shall be permitted for safe and environmentally sound management without additional burden on countries that would inhibit transboundary movement of plastic waste for this purpose. So one thing that we do also emphasize is that the provisions must facilitate transparency and compliance with waste management obligations under the instrument. Moving on to ghost gear or abandoned, lost, or otherwise discarded fishing gear, or ALDFG. This, as we know, makes up a significant portion of plastic pollution in the marine environment. With the study in 2018, I think this has been raised in a number of different fora. That synthetic fishing nets make up nearly half the mass of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Based on national circumstances and capabilities, effective measures taken across the full life cycle of plastic gear used for fishing activities shall be taken to prevent, reduce, eliminate abandoned, lost, or otherwise, so ALDFG, fishing gear, and aquaculture gear. The future instrument should include measures that consider internationally agreed rules, standards, and recommended practices and procedures, including those set out by the IMO and FAO. They should also include new design and technologies, monitoring, reporting, and traceability, sound end-of-life management, and facilitating compliance efforts by fishers and fishing communities, including artisanal and small-scale fishers. It is because of the nature of, particularly for us from the region, it's critical that artisanal and small-scale fishers are not negatively impacted by these measures. Moving on to remediation, we heard earlier from Tony about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and this speaks to the transboundary issue of plastic pollution and how it can carry invasive alien species, break down into problematic microplastics, and impose harmful impacts on some of our key sectors, economic sectors, fisheries, tourism, and of course, biodiversity. So for AOSIS, the instrument must include legally binding obligations which respect national circumstances and capabilities to take actions to remediate existing plastic pollution, particularly in the marine environment, and also ensure that SIDS are not disproportionately burdened by remediation activities, given that we're already disproportionately impacted by transboundary plastic pollution. Remediation activities are to be guided, as always, by the best available science, data and information, environmental assessments, environmentally sound and safe technologies, and monitoring to detect priority zones and hotspots. And to that end, AOSIS has proposed or sees value in the establishment of what we refer to as STEPs, scientific, technical, and economic panels, to make recommendations to the Conference of the Parties on more ambitious actions, updating or revision of targets, annexes, listings of chemicals, polymers, and plastic products that are to be regulated through the instrument, proposals for guidelines, criteria, and standards, monitoring and assessing the problem. The use of STEPs allows for information for the treaty and implementation of the treaty and the measures within the treaty contained within it to evolve as more information and data on the issue of plastic pollution becomes available. Allowing it to, as we say at the beginning, or mentioned at the beginning, allow for more ambitious action over time. That really is the end of my presentation. I just did want to do it before I finish. Wanted to put in a shameless plug for the webinar series that AOSIS does run. Today we had the 10th episode of the SIDS Talk Plastics webinar series, which was a reflection of INC 4. But also looking to the intersessional period, which we are now in, and towards INC 5. We also had, as one of our presenters today, Gwen, who will be speaking shortly. But also we had the INC chair, the chair of AOSIS, the SIDS Bureau member, all presenting their opinions or their views of how the process is going. I will, if you don't mind, Madam Moderator, I will put in the link to the uploaded webinar series in the chat. But thank you.
Mariah, we can't hear you. Nope. I think you need to unplug again.
Guys, I'm going to unplug it. So
Yeah. Please.
No. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you so much. And my apologies for the technical issues that we're facing here in Suva at this time. I think the presentation was so interesting that it busted my mic or something happened. So kudos to Anama for taking us through. And a big congratulations to Samoa as the leader of the IOSIS and also for representing the interests of the Pacific in that platform. There's a couple of things that I wanted to note. This includes the importance of transparency and compliance that Anama had shared with us. Interesting information around ghost gear and the various aspects of the negotiations. Given the plethora of information shared by our Pacific experts during this webinar, I wanted to inform all panelists and attendees for that matter that we will be circulating the presentations that have been made by our panelists for all our members of the POR and for their information. So thank you very much.
Another coalition, which was recognized in the recent Forum Leaders communique, is the High Ambition Coalition to End Plastic Pollution. To tell us a bit more, I should say, about this international coalition, Ms. Rosalind Strickland of the Cook Islands is with us today as a panelist. Ms. Strickland is the policy and legal advisor of the National Environment Service and has been very active in the Pacific team during this journey, the plastics treaty journey, I should say. She is a very good asset for the Pacific, of course. And not only does she have a robust understanding of the process, but she is also able to articulate tough positions with grace and, of course, much Pacific grace, I should say. Rose, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, moderator. Can I be heard? Am I clear? You can hear me? No.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yes.
loud and
You
clear.
can hear
Yes.
me. Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. Kia orana again, members, colleagues, experts, and everyone that's online joining us in this Zoom call. On behalf of the NIST Director and the team, we would like to thank SPREP and the OPOC team for this opportunity that's given to the Cook Islands to share some insights with regards to our engagement with the High Ambition Coalition, or I will be using the acronym HAC for short in this presentation. So my presentation is really tailored to be a brief overview with just information sharing, particularly just on the Cook Islands' experience. So I'm sorry, I think I need to share the presentation with everyone. Okay, I'm apologizing for this a bit of a disruption, but I hope you can see the slides. All right, so just a very brief objective. I would go over what this the High Ambition Coalition is all about, and what is our experience as becoming member of HAC, and why is it important from our purview to becoming a member, by outlining some of the costs and benefits that we had to take a step back and review before engaging ourselves to becoming a member, and just some information on how to become a member for countries that are interested. So to start off with, what is the High Ambition Coalition to End Plastic Pollution? So this group is an intergovernmental group of all like-minded countries. And one of their key initiatives is to form a coalition with countries that are looking towards an ambitious treaty with a focus on a more comprehensive and circular approach to address the full life cycle of plastics. And part of the HAC's common ambition is to end plastic pollution by 2040. And behind that, there is a global strategic goal that HAC has. There are three main goals. The first one is restraining plastic consumption and production on to sustainable levels. The second one is highlighting, or I guess, giving emphasis on enabling a circular economy for plastics with regards to the protection of environment and human health. And the third main one is highlighting the importance of an environmentally sound management, and also with regards to recycling of plastics, so waste management. So at the moment, there's about 66 countries that's in the records that's members of the HAC. Within the 66 countries, there's 3 Pacific Island countries. That's us, the Cook Islands, the FSM, and the Solomon Islands. So we became member of the HAC last year, prior to INC2. So the other 2, which is FSM and Solomon Islands, also eventually became members of the HAC. And for us, the Cook Islands, since our relationship within the HAC, we've established relationship with other countries that has similar ambitions towards this treaty. And this is, for example, technical and expert information was well shared across the countries, and also access to information towards a more ambitious treaty. So why become a HAC member? What are the costs and benefits? In our experience, we did not find any cost to becoming a member. There's no financial cost. It is open to all. There's the HAC objectives is also well aligned with the Pacific's position with regards towards an ambitious global instrument. The main benefits also is to the HAC is more, it aims towards lobbying towards eliminating global problematic plastics, including banning and restrictions of plastic products. Others includes developing a more global sustainable criteria as well as standards. And I think under those benefits, I would just reflect back to what was being shared earlier, that the Pacific region only contributes a very small percentage to the global pollution. So having to be a member of the HAC, I guess, also gives that benefit where we're also supporting a global commitment towards an effort to end, or I guess, to control plastic pollution in general. So the other benefits that we saw too is that HAC lobbies towards setting global baselines and targets for sustainability throughout the life cycle of plastics. And this is very important, and I guess it's also instrumental for us, the Pacific, when we are going more towards this, looking at expertise, or I guess expert information or technical information more on understanding these chemicals. And so that's a very important point. I also highlight that some of the benefits, also the coalition is looking at or lobbying towards undertaking intersessional work on essential elements and issues with regards to the negotiations, as well as the work on social, economic, as well as environmental aspects of the various options that is addressed or that's entailed under the draft, zero draft treaty. More so, HAC lobbies towards facilitating an effective technical and financial assistance, as well as providing scientific and social economic assessments to help member countries. Lastly, I think joining HAC will bring Pacific countries that are not yet members on par with other member states that are wanting to address the full life cycle of plastics, plastic pollution. Sorry, a few last points to add on the benefits as well is HAC also looks at ensuring transparency in the value of chain of plastics and material and chemical compositions. It also includes establishing mechanisms for strengthening commitments, targets, and controls over time, monitoring and reporting at each stages through the life cycle of plastic, as well as awareness awareness. So awareness raising and identifying priorities for negotiations for the INCs, and that includes the upcoming INC. So that's a very short presentation from my end. How do we become, or how, if anyone is interested in becoming a member, you can go directly onto the HAC's website. They have a link there that provides direction on how to becoming a member. Otherwise, there is a formal process behind it where there needs to be a note verbally or a letter that needs to be addressed to their co-chair to show interest in this, to becoming a member. Yeah, so it's open to all this far. Me takimata, thank you.
Thank you very much, Rose, for that insightful presentation. And also for sharing with us the High Ambition Coalition and its ambition to end plastic pollution by 2040. I understand that you mentioned of how Cook Islands, FSM, and the Solomon Islands are members of the HAC. And that it's open to other members of the Pacific, like other Pacific Island members who would like to join. Thank you for also reiterating the point about the small percentage that the Pacific contributes to plastic pollution. And this is very concerning for us, especially being on the side where we get the biggest challenges and impacts from this pollution. Like the membership on HAC that Rose had shared, the link with us, I believe that Anama had also shared a link on the IOSIS and their presentations. We will share this with all the members of the Pacific Oceans Alliance together with the presentations after this webinar. So thank you again, Rose. Our next presenter started following the process at INC2 as part of the PSEEDS Chairs team, which was held by Palau at the time. Interestingly, she had not followed the process for 24 hours. Would you believe that? When she was propelled to the role of co-facilitator of one of the contact groups. I hear that only Palauans can do that. So today, with us, we have Ms. Gwen Siso, who has quite the multilateralism experience, who will brief us on what these contact groups are and how the process is structured so far. Like Anama and Marjorie, Gwen is also currently embedded in the BBNJ process, having just come back from the UNFCCC discussions in Bonn. Gwen, thank you very much for taking the time. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Facilitator. I hope you can hear me clearly. Thank you. And I do not have a beautiful presentation like my previous speakers, so I can only grace the beauty of this screen with my face. So I hope that's okay. But thank you. And I thank you for the introduction, and also thank you for the invitation to be a part of this meeting. I'm really glad to have heard from our previous presenters about the Pacific SIDS and then AOSIS as well as HAC. And Palau is very fortunate to be a member of all three groups. So it gives us a very good perspective of this side, but as a co-chair, I've been upgraded from a co-facilitator to a co-chair, is that now we also see all the sides of all the other positions from the other groupings. So I know Tony had given a really good presentation, sort of the overview of the current process. So I'm just going to briefly go over that, but really focusing on sort of what is the status of where we are now in terms of the negotiation. So As you noted, I did start in INC2. It was a very harsh one going in, as I was not really familiar with the plastics. But I must say I'm really grateful to be part of the Pacific because we have a good team of experts from around the Pacific that help. And I would like to specifically note Mr. Cal Ferrer, who has been really instrumental from OPAC, who's been really instrumental in supporting some of the work that we do for me to be able to then chair the meeting. So in INC1, which unfortunately I was not in, my understanding from that meeting is basically we laid down some of the organizational matters that needed to be discussed, especially on the process of how we're going to be conducting these meetings, such as the chair and sort of somewhat of the governance structure that we're going to have for this meeting. Coming in on INC2, I think was the first sort of full discussion on what the elements of this treaty was going to be like. And the outcome of that meeting basically was sort of the zero draft. And that's sort of the first initial attempt at creating what that potential draft of the treaty would look like, but it was not a very fully fleshed out document. So of course in INC3, what we had hoped to see was that we would have more of a discussion using the zero draft as a basis for that. So in INC2, we have two co-chairs. So I co-chair with Germany on sort of the scientific contact group 1, and contact group 1 covered the area more of the core obligations. So this is more of the technical parts like the polymers, product design, waste management, just transition. There's about, I really should know this, but I think there's about 13 specific elements inside part 2, which is where the core obligations are located. And then we had contact group 2, which is basically contained where the means of implementation, the institutional arrangement. So we had 2 contact groups that were running in parallel with discussions where we heard statements, and those statements were used as a basis for creating the zero draft. In INC3, we increased the number of contact groups, and this became contact group 3, which then covered the remaining items of the remaining items within the zero draft, which was like principles, scope, the definition, the objective, I'm sorry, the objective was actually covered within our contact group, but the preambular paragraph, scope, and those were sort of, including intersessional work was sort of discussed during contact group 3 at INC3. At INC3, what we had was basically the outcome of INC3 was a revised zero draft. What that meant is basically the zero draft was considered, the initial zero draft was considered, members did not consider the zero draft to fully capture all of the elements that they considered should be within the draft itself. And so INC3 basically worked to develop a revised zero draft that then contained or compiled all of the positions of all the countries inside that zero draft. And the zero draft basically resulted, the revised zero draft was like a compilation of positions, but then was revised to include like positions. I'm sorry, not positions, options. Because you had varying options from no text on a certain element to multiple versions of the text, and also an alternate text or additional text. So that basically created a document that went from 30 to about 75 pages to be able to compile. So the revised zero draft then became the basis for the negotiations in INC4. The one outcome that we were not able to achieve in INC3 was intersessional work, which is something that the Pacific and AOSIS was calling for as necessary part of the process to enable some of the discussions that we could not fit within the INC process, but to also inform some of the decisions that needed to be made in this process. So in INC 4, using the revised draft, INC 4 was where we also sort of introduced another new part of the structure. So in INC 3, we had 3 contact groups. In INC 4, after many consultations by the chair with many of the members, we changed the structure to have now only 2 contact groups. You had contact group 1 that discussed part 1 and part 2. So this is the preambular paragraphs and then the core obligations. And then you had contact group 2, which then took over the means of implementation. My apologies, I don't remember the so parts 4 to 6, which also includes like institutional arrangements and other matters. In that, we also introduced what we call subgroups. So the intent of the subgroups was supposed to sort of create a smaller grouping, because in INC 3, we tend to discuss or have statements that would be read by countries, and we had to, because of the amount of items we had to cover, we had to go topic by topic rather than sort of more fluid or more organic discussion. We had hoped that in INC 4, with this particular structure, we would be able to at least achieve that, which then meant that we can actually start negotiating. So in INC 4, we were able to sort of accomplish a bit of negotiation. So we went through the first reading of the revised zero draft, which was 75 pages, and trying to streamline the text to make it more, a text that you can use as a basis for actual negotiations. And after that streamlining process, we then actually began. So we were able to then actually start negotiating. So you'll see in the compilation text that should be hopefully really soon as basically well, we didn't succeed in reducing the number of pages, but at least now we're able to at least sort of reduce some of the options. But you'll see that there's quite a bit of bracketed. So the compilation text will be basically a compilation of all the discussions that had happened in all the subgroupings that happened. So we were able to at least achieve a couple of things in INC 4, which is 1, we began the negotiations, text-based negotiations. 2, we were finally able to agree to an intersessional work. So on to intersessional work, which I will go on in just a bit. And then 3, we were able to then agree to the legal drafting group, which then will help with actually, I guess, make it convert whatever decisions or agreements that we make into sort of the treaty text that we need to finally approve. So that's where we are in terms of the INCs. What I've noticed from INC 2 to INC 4, we do have, as my previous speaker has noted, we have PCIDs. So the PCIDs have their positions, which then they're also a grouping within AOSIS. And that negotiation, so then AOSIS also has that position. So you have these groupings. We also have like groupings from, so EU speaks as the 27 member states. You also have in different forums, sometimes they're called differently, but initially they were called GCC. And I apologize, on top of my head, I do not remember what GCC stands for, but we also, but with the addition of other countries in that, they are known as the LMDCs, like-minded developing countries. I believe that's what it stands for, and they have their own positions on. You also have, of course, the African group of states, which is a region, but also a negotiating bloc. So aside from all these groupings that have, and these groupings usually have basically similar positions and they speak as a group, but you also have the 5 regions, and the 5 regions are the Asia Pacific region, which I believe is around 53 countries, 52, 53 countries, and please correct me if I'm wrong. We have the African group at about 54 countries. We have WEOG, and that's the Western Europe and other organizations. So Australia, New Zealand actually falls under that one. We have, as well as the EU also falls under WEOG. We have GULAC, which is the Latin American countries. And we have CEE, which is the Central and Eastern Europe. But I'm also note that sometimes they're noted as EEG, which is the Eastern European group. So these are the 5 regions. Of course, the PCIDS is a part of the Asia Pacific region, as noted by Marjorie. And we also are, so the SIDS regions, of course, we have the Caribbean, we have the Pacific, and then we have the ACE, which is the Atlantic, Indian, and South China Sea. So these are sort of the groupings that come in. Each one has, depending on the grouping that you're at, the positions are very different. So this is part of negotiating, is to try and come up to, in a sense, that consensus. And I apologize, I also missed that there are, of course, while the groupings exist, and usually the groupings speak first, you can also speak in your national capacity because you are a member of the treaty, and therefore that option is always open to countries. So really my role as a co-chair is trying to see how we can sort of facilitate these negotiations toward a consensus, and a consensus that allows us to then develop what that treaty is. And one of the things that I would like to know is that we really need to, overall progress for the plastics treaty has been a lot slower than what most people had hoped. And now with INC 5 being slated as the last of the INCs, there's a lot of questions on how are we going to be able to actually agree on a treaty, knowing that there's so much work that is needed in order to help inform and get us to the point where we can now agree. So intersessional work is coming up. Will be at the end of August. But the intersessional work is going to be focused on 2 specific. It's more of an expert working group. So one will be focusing on more of the science or core obligation, the science and technical part of it, and one will be focused on finance. And in the science, we'll be addressing more of like, the mandate is really to identify and analyze sort of criteria and 9 criteria based approaches for products, chemicals, and plastic products, as well as product design. So we, as one of 3 co-chairs, as decided out of INC 4, so that will be Palau, Germany, the original co-chairs, plus Iraq. How will we, the question is, how are we developing the sort of the work program towards that? And we're currently at that stage, and we'll be releasing that shortly. And I just want to just highlight very quickly that the deadline for the submission of experts will be July 4th. That was extended to July 4th. But I do also caution members that if you are applying for travel support, please note that that's a separate process that does require the approval. So please make sure that you submit your nominations ahead of time. So it's just a caution because we're a bit worried about the slow submissions that are coming in. And we want to make sure that the Pacific is well represented. So thank you. I think I've gone a bit too long, but thank you. And I'm here and willing to answer any questions if necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Ms. Long, Gwen, and congratulations on your promotion to co-chair. And thank you very much for sharing those insights around the structures, the mechanisms involved in the INC process to capture the positions of the Pacific in these negotiations. I think it's very important that we continue to support our Pacific experts. And thank you very much for raising those very valid points for us. As mentioned by the Pacific Oceans Commissioner and also through our technical expert, Tekau, the Office of the Pacific Oceans Commissioner is ready to support our negotiators and our experts through this process leading up to INC 5. With not much further ado, attendees and panelists, I think we have heard from several government representatives who have shared their perspectives. And I think by now you must have a fairly good understanding of this process and the dynamics of the plastics negotiations led by our foreign member governments. As we know, civil society acts as a link between our states and our society or our communities. To enrich our discussions with more perspectives, we turn now to our experts that represent a handful of civil society organizations in the Pacific. The first one is Alfred Ralifo of the World Wildlife Fund for Nature, Pacific. Alfred is sort of the Pacific interests advocate in global commons related negotiations. You will find him covering meetings on climate change, biodiversity, and oceans. Most impressively, he does not do figuration, but provides good insights and recommendations to delegations. So thank you, Alfred, for all the support. Alfred, please share your thoughts on what key elements this treaty aims to have from your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Moira, and everyone. And thank you so much for the invitation to be part of this esteemed panel. I believe that what I would want to share has already been mentioned by a lot of our previous speakers. So that's great to know the synergies and the linkages between WWF's perspectives on what an effective treaty should look like to end plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, and at the same time protect human health and the environment. So just give me a few seconds to try and share my screen. Can you all see the screen? Thank you.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. So my name is Alfred Ralifo. I work for WWF, and I'm based here in Fiji. And I specifically focus on the multilateral environmental agreements in relation to anything on biodiversity, climate, and oceans. And I also try to engage with a lot of our governments from across the Pacific and provide support wherever needed. And so the must-haves of a meaningful treaty. For this new treaty to be effective in ending plastic pollution, there are a few priority things that we'd like to see reflected in this treaty. Number one, firstly, global binding rules and priority measures, and these would include global bans and phase-outs on the most harmful, high-risk, and avoidable plastic products, including chemicals of concern and primary plastic polymers, including microplastics. So that is the first part that we would like to see in this new treaty. Secondly, we would like to see global binding actions in terms of product design requirements and performance to ensure reduction, reuse, and safe recycling for all plastics. Thirdly, as part of this treaty, we need to see adequate implementation package, which includes, number one, a comprehensive finance package utilizing all available sources of funding, a robust financing mechanism to support implementation of specific binding measures, and also other non-financial means of implementation, such as technology transfer, technical assistance, and capacity building. Lastly, there needs to be requirements for monitoring and reporting, periodic assessments, and mechanisms that will allow scientific recommendations for parties on decisions to strengthen the treaty over time, something like a ratcheting of efforts and actions. Why do we need those key components as part of an effective treaty? The growing plastic pollution crisis demands policy measures that go beyond the voluntary model that has been in place for the last 3 decades. Without a comprehensive set of blinding global rules, needed to manage plastic volumes probably would double in the next few decades up till by 2040. And for this reason, the treaty must be grounded in binding global rules, phasing out and banning the most harmful pollutants and pollutant practices. So global rules will only global rules will only achieve impacts when they are effectively implemented by all parties. So that means that the robust implementation measures must be in place to support parties in terms of compliance with binding obligations. So a comprehensive package of finance package utilizing both public and private sources together with other means of implementation is needed. And lastly, the adoption of the treaty is only the beginning of a long-term mission to end plastic pollution. States must plan for gradual strengthening of the treaty over time to ensure that both control measures and implementation measures could be enhanced as new data become available through parties during monitoring and reporting, and also new knowledge and technologies emerge. This will also include mechanisms that will allow for technical recommendations to be made by experts based on sound scientific evidence, and for parties to decide on necessary additions or amendments to the treaty. And this will help strengthen existing rules over time by expanding annexes and to adopt new binding rules as necessary. In terms of the binding global rules, we have some reports that you could find on our website, and when my presentation will be shared by the organizers of the webinar, and you can see the links to the reports that we have on WWF's websites, which you can refer to for more information. So as part of the binding global rules, WWF has actually produced a report which looks at eliminating and reducing high-risk plastic products that can be based on pollution risks and also elimination feasibility. So if a product has a very high risk of becoming a pollutant, causing environment and health impacts to humans, then it will be considered as high pollution risks and should be prioritized under the treaty for banning or elimination and phase out. So pollution risk can be determined by 2 specific features. One is the probability of direct or indirect introduction of the pollutant into the environment, such as the air, water, and the soil, and the impact that it can have on humans, human health, and other living species and the environment. And secondly, in terms of elimination feasibility, this can be divided into 3 different components. The technical feasibility, which looks at examining whether it is currently feasible to eliminate plastic pollution from a given product, or it can look at the criterion of socioeconomic feasibility, which looks at whether the elimination of the pollution from a given plastic product is likely to disproportionately affect certain demographic groups or communities, bearing in mind that there are differences within and between countries who are going to be parties to this new treaty once the treaty is being adopted. And lastly, the criterion of unintended environmental consequences related to the risks of giving rise to other significant environmental problems. And so these are some of the approaches to prioritizing and eliminating the most problematic and harmful plastic products and chemicals of concern and processes. So some examples of products that can be proposed for global bans, such as the non-necessary fibers, non-woven products that can be found in wet wipes, cigarette butts, disposable vacuum filters, and plastic tea bags, or non-necessary single-use items such as those that are used in the cutleries, plastic plates and cups, earbuds, and disposable e-cigarettes, and intentionally added microplastics that can be found in personal care products such as toothpaste, skincare, and scrubs. So these are some examples that you can find on the report that can easily be identified using the criteria for bans, phased out, product standards, and also the economic instruments. In summary, an effective global treaty must be legally binding, must be very specific and clear about what states must do, must prepare for gradual strengthening, and also incentivize participation and compliance, must be ambitious, and not forgetting the other relevant overarching principles such as transparency, accountability, compliance, and also the opportunity to gradually strengthen the treaty over time. So I decided to include some texts that look at how the specific issues of what an effective treaty would look like. So the text that is highlighted in orange gives you what global, where all or state parties need to adhere to or to be binding to. Text that is highlighted in blue is a mandatory text that states what member states need to adhere to or to be compliant with. And the texts that are highlighted in yellow could be examples of text that actually looks at what specifically states must do in order to avoid any confusion and to ensure that states are clear about their obligations and can be supported by civil society organizations, communities, and other stakeholders. So that is a brief summary of what an effective treaty looks like from WWF's perspective, and happy to provide further information. You can find more information on our WWF Panda website, looking at No Plastics in Nature program. Thank you very much, and happy to contribute to the discussions and questions and answers afterwards.
Many thanks, Alfred, for taking us through your presentation. I believe I speak for everyone when I say it was very insightful and very interesting, and there were many technical matters that you had captured. We, of course, look forward to the continuous contributions that you will have to this process, especially on the effectiveness of the treaty. Without any further ado, from our speakers so far, we have heard the need to have an ambitious treaty because science tells us about the negative impacts of plastic pollution. Well, at this juncture, let us hear from science. We are delighted to have with us the coordinator of the Scientists Coalition for an Effective Plastics Treaty, who is also a woman from the Pacific. Ladies and gentlemen, attendees and panelists, Dr. Teresia Farrelly is an associate professor at Massey University. She has been very active in providing support for the Pacific throughout the negotiation process. Dr. Farrelly is the embodiment of dedication, I should say. I hear that she attended a couple of these INC negotiations in crutches, undeterred, I should say. Yes, we are delighted to have Dr. Farrelly talk to us about what would make this treaty effective, and most importantly, why the Scientists Coalition advocating for strong measures in the production phase of plastic. So, Dr. Farrelly, over to you.
Thank you for that introduction. Are you able to see my slide okay?
Yes,
thank
you.
Oh, that's great. Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you for that. And I realise the time is ticking along, so I won't delay proceedings too much. But I did want to say that in relation to the open-ended working group, the expert working group, that's in the intersessional work that's coming up, we have 3 intersessional meetings online, and then we have an in-person open-ended expert working group in Bangkok from the 24th to the 28th of August. We've been circulating a list of experts who are available for both these the country delegations. And so if you're interested in any other of our experts who may provide expert support to the expert groups, please let me know. We're also very, very interested in ensuring that these proceedings are underpinned by a robust conflict of interest, as I can see Imogen has also put into the chat. That's absolutely the foundation of the Scientists Coalition, a body of over 350 independent scientists from all over the world with expertise specifically in plastic pollution. And we've been following the Global Plastics Treaty since the beginning. So just wanting to say as well, I'm hearing a lot of alignment with the PCID's AOSIS positions, country positions, with civil society. And for us, though, the full life cycle of plastics starts right at extraction phase. That's the extraction of the natural resources, the feedstocks needed for both conventional fossil fuel-based plastics, but also the biomass for bio-based plastics, degradables, biodegradables as well, all the way through to the safe and sustainable extraction or removal of plastics from the environment and the remediation of sites that have been contaminated with plastics chemicals and with plastics, including the legacy plastics that we hear, including those the nets that make up a large proportion of what we find in the marine environment. Here's a note here too, just to link together the connection with climate change and plastics. And there's been a report recently released from one of our colleagues in the Scientists Coalition, Nihan Karali and her colleagues who have updated some of the data on the connections between the primary plastics production and the total global GHG emissions. There's also been a report released called the Plastichem report. Martin Wagner, one of our steering committee members, was a lead author on this, and found that 16,000 chemicals are now used in plastics. So those are the plastics chemicals, the chemicals specifically related to plastics. And this is why we're really keen on ensuring that chemicals remain in the treaty negotiations. We were hoping to have expert group dedicated to chemicals, plastic chemicals. We don't have that. However, we do have, of course, the expert group 2, which is looking at plastics chemicals, but as part of polymers and products. So we're hoping to make sure that those chemicals stay in there. So and the reason for that is because more than 4,200 chemicals are substance of concern, and only 1% of plastic chemicals are regulated under other multilateral environmental agreements. And there's plenty of health impacts, not only of the plastic chemicals, but also nano microplastics. Can't get into this because of the time, but we have released a rapid response document in response to some of the interventions from negotiators at INC4 who were claiming that there was not a clear enough correlation between both plastics, chemicals, and nano microplastics. There are, and so I'm happy to share that with anybody who was interested as well. And of course, making sure that we are aware that plastics are linked to the triple planetary crisis. Our main priority as a scientist coalition is to try to ensure that negotiators are aware of the need to set very ambitious primary plastic polymer reduction targets. So baselines and targets, both at global level and at national level for national implementation plans when we get to the implementation phase. And there's good reason for that. You've all got access to that PowerPoint, so I won't need to go into this, but suffice to say that even if we were to reduce plastic production globally by 1 to 3% per annum, we wouldn't get anywhere near close enough to avoid a real, to reduce the impacts on people and environment in this global plastics crisis we have before us and the reason for the treaty. So essentially, this is our bottom line. We need to reduce hazardous and unsustainable plastic chemicals, polymers, and products at a global level and substantially. This is something I think that's going to be really interesting for the Pacific Island countries when we're looking at plastics, chemicals, and polymers, but also products as well. This, I think, will help us with a just transition. This speaks to the need for both technical, financial, and capacity building support as a subsidiary body under the instrument, to ensure Pacific Island countries are supported, considering Pacific Island countries don't produce plastics themselves, and they do it in a very, very tiny amount. It's really hardly worth mentioning. And so the essential use concept is important. If you've got a new slide, please ask me later on and contact me if you have questions about how that will help Pacific Island countries specifically. And we have our starting and strengthen approach here as well. And it's very important for us to take a hazards-based approach rather than a risk-based approach. The reason is there. And this slide provides you with a colourful diagram of some of the priorities of the Scientist Coalition. But please reach out to us if you have any questions about any of this. And in here you have our QR code, which takes you to all of our outputs, our policy briefs and fact sheets, which are really accessible. And many of those have been translated into 6 UN languages. And there are some fact sheets there that have been specifically designed for the Pacific Islands. So thank you very much. And I hope that wasn't too fast for everybody, but I hope to have some more time to dig into any of this at another date. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Teresia, for taking us through. I think you did very excellently on time. I understand that there's information that can be provided through the coalition that we will also reach out to you for access, and then we can share this broadly with the Pacific Oceans Alliance. Last but certainly not the least, it is my pleasure to introduce Rufino Varea, our youth representative and the newly appointed regional director for the Pacific Island Climate Action Network. Rufino was also a fellow with the Pacific Island Development Program, another crop agency within the Pacific family, and has been supporting both Fiji and the PSIDS during the negotiations. But today, we wanted to give him a hat, which for many early careers, for many people with early careers, it is often a curse rather than a blessing, especially being a youth. Until I should say very recently, where like Rufino, we've seen an explosion in the Pacific around opportunities for youth. And that just goes to show their recognition for what they bring to the table during this negotiation process. So while we love inviting youth representatives, we also need to be mindful that sometimes we don't give them the chance that they need to build their experience because they do not have much experience, except for Rufino, I should say. He is still a youth for that matter. And I would like to request Rufino if he can share some of his insights and what he entails this negotiations will mean for future generations. Rufino, I'm delighted to invite you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Moira. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. I don't have a presentation and I will do my best to keep it very brief. Good afternoon, everyone. Noa Maori and Bula Vinaka from the Fiji Islands. I want to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of the event, the POA, OPOC, and SPREP for inviting me to speak about the Plastics Treaty from a youth and young scientist perspective. So we've heard from previous speakers about the impacts of plastic pollution on the Pacific Islands and the call to address its full life cycle as it is reflected in the Pacific Regional Declaration on the Prevention of Marine Litter and Plastics Pollution and its impacts. We have also heard that the impacts of plastic pollution are long-lasting, affecting the environment and human health for several generations. So this makes plastic pollution an intergenerational issue. The problems that our next generation will face due to plastic pollution will likely be greater than what we face today. So even now, plastic pollution is so widespread, it's so persistent that we are dealing with the consequences and the legacies of plastic pollution being borne by us from the previous generation. So when youths and young scientists engage in these plastics treaty negotiations, we are demanding that the treaty uphold intergenerational equity and justice. So youths are now part of these discussions so that their children don't have to be. Intergenerational equity is a legal principle, meaning that future generations should reasonably expect equitable access to planetary resources. It's a matter of justice that our intergenerational community gives a voice to voiceless future generations. So previous and current generations have created, like what we've heard from Tricia, problematic plastics and the harmful chemicals, mainly out of convenience, without realizing their devastating impacts on our natural systems and resources that are meant to equally benefit future generations. So to address this problem equitably through this plastics treaty instrument, a few justice principles should be considered. And there's some that I picked out from this journal published in Marine Policy, which I completely agree with, and I wanted to share it with you. And it's kind of reflective of this report that I published last year. The first is that negotiators and policymakers must account for the historical and contemporary inequities of plastic pollution, striving for distributive justice in the allocation of costs and benefits. The second is that they need to pursue procedural justice. That means ensuring full and meaningful participation of marginalized communities, especially in the global south, like us from the Pacific Islands. The third is that they must promote justice-oriented and rights-based rules at all levels of governance, avoiding policies that deepen environmental injustice, that leave room for racism or human rights abuses. The fourth part is that negotiators and policymakers need to impose strong regulatory measures to prevent all types of plastic pollution, including controls on extractors, on manufacturers, on retailers, recyclers, and waste companies. And finally, they must establish a fair and supportive financing and technical assistance, a mechanism with high polluter states and corporations paying most of the costs to compensate polluted communities, to enhance the capacity of low-income countries, and to help marginalized workers, including waste pickers, transition to a pollution-free plastics economy. And so our governments can take equitable considerations for collective regional action in these treaty negotiations to safeguard the rights of children, youth, and the future generation based on intergenerational equity and justice. And as we all know, from the Pacific, we are at the forefront of this plastic pollution crisis. And we know we cannot address it alone. We need to approach this problem maybe through common but differentiated responsibilities, noting our special circumstances of Pacific SIDS. But however we look at it, however we approach it, equity must be at the core of our efforts and our goals. So I will stop there. I want to thank you all for listening. Payaxia, Vinaka Vakalevu, and happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Rufino, and thank you for reiterating the importance of us addressing this problem and the need for us to all work together to address this. Ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, I understand we have 4 more minutes till 2 p.m. We have actually come to the conclusion of our presentation segment. Most of the questions that were sent in by attendees has been answered by our panelists. And for that matter, I would like to thank you all panelists for your continuous collaboration in this space, and for attendees for that matter. I have a couple of announcements that I would like to bring to the floor while we wrap up. So as much as this has been a wonderful and engaging discussion, I would like to warmly thank our partner SPREP for helping us organize this webinar. Warm thanks to our speakers, of course, in particular, our New York-based ones, Fafeta Ilasi, for coming online after work today, your time to engage in our discussions. You can all go to sleep after this. Thank you so much for your help. As mentioned, we will send a post-webinar survey shortly to look forward to your feedback, including what other topics you would like to hear or what other activities and contexts you would like us to collaborate in this space. I wish to also highlight that SPREP, in conjunction with the government of Tuvalu, is organizing the 4th Clean Pacific Roundtable that will take place from the 5th to the 9th of August in Tuvalu, with a specific plastic dialogue designated on the 7th of August, and a potential side event to look out for at the PIF Leaders meeting in August. I'd also like to highlight that OPOC is also organizing in the spirit of protecting the Pacific and on ensuring collaboration. OPOC is co-organizing the BBNJ regional workshop next week from the 3rd to the 11th of July. And we look forward to your continuous engagement as members of the POR. Thank you all for tuning in today and for this constructive engagement. As part of the Office of the Pacific Oceans Commissioner and our partners, we will continue to create more spaces, or I should say a POR space, to share information and insights on ocean matters. But before I say goodbye and good night to all of you, I'd like to throw one question to Gwen. Gwen, I know this is very ad hoc, but just to sum up, if you can answer this for us, do you think we will have a plastics treaty by Christmas?
That's a very hard question, and probably, please do not quote me on this. I am hopeful. The chair's team is very hopeful. That is within our mandate. But at the same time, I'm also conscious that we are in the hands of the members. And I believe it will be very dependent on the outcomes of or progress of the intersessional work as well as INC 5. So that's the only answer I can give at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gwen. With those concluding words, I thank you again. Manuia te aso, manuia te po. Goodbye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much, Moira. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mahalo.